Good morning. Welcome to session C, the final session for this morning at the Orange Big IDEA conference. My name is Kim Thorne, and I am your Project 10 Transition Education Network representative for Orange County and East Central Florida. Project 10 is a... Good morning. Welcome to session C out of the Florida Department of Education, Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services, that is tasked with all things transition. Today, we're going to be talking about deferment. We hope that you find this information helpful as you plan for your young adult. If you need a translation, here on the screen is directions on how to translate to your native language. During this training, we're going to talk about deferment and what it means to defer the receipt of your standard high school diploma. We're going to talk about the deferment options available for students with disabilities. We're going to identify post-secondary options and considerations, and we're going to look at that transition IEP and the components and how they are successful in determining deferment and post-secondary planning. And you will be given some resources to support deferment planning and understanding. So exactly what is deferment? We know that the Individuals with Disabilities Act specifies that a free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, is available to all students with disabilities who have not reached age 22 and who have not earned a standard diploma. So if a student is able to graduate with a special diploma, a certificate of completion, a special certificate of completion, or GED, and has not reached age 22, the school district must make FAPE available to the student at the student's option until the student's 22nd birthday or until he or she earns a standard diploma. So with this in mind, we know that in the state of Florida, all students with disabilities are on a pathway to earn a standard diploma. So when they earn that standard diploma, it is considered a change of placement, after which the state will no longer have to provide the student with that free and appropriate public education. However, Florida also is of the understanding that some students who earn a standard diploma might need additional time to meet their career goals, their measurable post-secondary goals. So in 2014, the Florida statute was passed, 1003.4282, and it states that a student with a disability who has met requirements for that standard high school diploma may defer receipt of a standard diploma if, and there's two prongs to this, the student has an individual education plan that prescribes special education, transition planning, transition services, or related services through age 21. And the student must be enrolled in one of the 5 areas of deferment eligibility. And those 5 areas are accelerated college credit instruction, industry certification courses that lead to college credit, an early college program, or courses to satisfy the scholar designation requirements, or a structured work-study, internship, or pre-apprenticeship program. We know that deferment allows students to work specifically on skills and gain experiences that remain a need for them in order to be closer to reaching their post-secondary goals. It's not a 13th or 14th grade, but a transition period or opportunity to work on transition-specific goals and experiences. Least restrictive environment remains a critical consideration for deferring students' IEPs. And then IEP teams must also ensure that students with disabilities have as much access as possible and appropriate to be engaged with students and colleagues, coworkers without disabilities. So we want to make sure that we're really identifying what the student's needs and what that programming is going to look like. So when we talk about enrolled, a student who defers into an improved program IEP amendments are likely necessary to ensure accurate service delivery and supports, as well as the opportunity to update and document any final deferment activities. So the student is expected to be enrolled in an eligible deferment program at the start of the semester or school year immediately following in which they met graduation requirements. So they can either be expected to meet all entrance criteria for that deferment program, or they might already be enrolled. If you think of the first four, those students are already actively enrolled in that deferment eligible program. They're already in those advanced rigorous courses. We're going to go in depth with those in just a minute as well. The timeline that the Florida legislation has set forth is that while we start talking about deferment and letting parents know about deferment, and deferment information begins at 11 turning 12, the statement documenting discussion of the deferment process isn't required in the IEP until age 14 or prior to beginning high school, whichever occurs first. So if your student is turning 14 prior to 8th grade, you would start documenting that discussion at that time. Then the year prior to the year the student is expected to meet graduation requirements, which is typically the 11th grade, but not always, there must be a signed statement by the parent or adult student indicating that they understand the deferment process and whether or not that student is eligible and planning on making the choice to defer. That statement can be fluid up until May 15th of the year the student meets graduation requirements, also known as their senior year most of the time. At that time, it must be stated somewhere in the IEP that the free and appropriate public education obligations end if the diploma is not deferred. That students and families have until May 15th to make that decision final. And again, just because the student does not go to the graduation ceremony does not mean that they deferred. It is an IEP team decision. Some general considerations and implications is that there are no disability categories that are excluded from potential eligibility of deferral. Again, we start talking about this information at age 12 or during the student's 7th grade year. The deferment programs are going to vary by school districts. So if you've been to a neighboring school district, it might look different in Orange than it did in Osceola or Seminole. Deferment programming is developed to meet that student's specific needs. And then IEP teams must have knowledge about eligibility requirements and application processes for deferment programs in their school district. And then identify any needs into that student's IEP. And we also want to be cognizant of that deferment may be a more restrictive setting for many of our students with disabilities versus entry directly into post-secondary settings. So what are those 5 categories of eligible deferment programming? Here they are at a glance. The 4 in green, accelerated college credit, early college programming, industry certification, and scholar designation, are all academic based with industry certification, also employment based. Most of them have a medium to medium high level of rigor for academics. Settings can vary across most of the programs, and then most of them have an application process. The 5th one, the structured work study, you will see that it can address academic, employment, or independent living skills. Its academic rigor varies depending on the deferment program, a variety of settings, and they sometimes can have an application process. So this first one, the accelerated college credit is intended to shorten the time necessary for the student to complete requirements associated with their high school diploma and a post-secondary degree, as well as open up their curriculum options. It also can include dual enrollment and early admission as provided for in statute 1007.271, an advanced placement course, credit by examination course, the International Baccalaureate program, and the Advanced International Certificate of Education program. Those are all considered accelerated college credit programmings. Some coursework through the Florida Virtual School also may provide opportunities for early graduation and acceleration. Available accelerated college credit options are going to vary by school districts. The requirements may vary depending on that dual enrollment. They may have rigorous eligibility requirements, and then any coursework is documented as being completed. However, the final grades does not impact the student's final high school graduation GPA. Early college programs is another deferment eligibility that revolves around earning a post-secondary degree, such as an associate's degree, along with their high school diploma. However, how it differs from dual enrollment is that early college programming is a cohort of students, whereas dual enrollment is individually based. So with that being said, it's a cohort, a group of students are entering into a performance contract at the same time, taking the same courses, enrolled full-time in that post-secondary institution, and moving about at seemingly the same pace. And again, it does require an articulation agreement between the district and the college. The eligibility requirements are going to vary by district and by program. There may be some eligibility requirements that need to be met, and the cohorts may begin as early as 9th grade. The third is that industry certification leading to college credit. We know industry certification as those career and technical education courses. We know that these can be very important and helpful in helping our students develop knowledge and skills they need to be prepared for their college and careers. The CTE courses also emphasize real-world skills within a student's career of interest, and it is a cost-effective way for students to start a career in as little as 1 or 2 years of school. There are 17 career clusters that have been identified, and the Department of Education across our state has a wide variety of those CTE degree and certificate programs, and that can be found at the Florida Department of Education's website. What's important to know here is, again, available courses and programs for industry certification will vary across school districts. Some of those CTE programs may have eligibility requirements. Sometimes when our students with most significant cognitive disabilities can participate in those CTE programs with the modifications, they do benefit from that exposure. Project 10, we have a lot of CTE resources. If our website is project10.info. If you click on publications, you will find the career and technical education publication, as well as a topical brief on CTE education. Great website and great publications to learn more about CTE programming. The fourth is that courses for Scholar Diploma designation. You will see that the Scholar Diploma designation is a very rigorous academic-based designation on a student's diploma. Higher level maths and sciences are required, along with the world language, and then a rigorous course such as an advanced placement, IB, ACE, or dual enrollment course. And students must pass any standardized test and cannot receive a waiver for that diploma designation. So if your student has a need, they're looking for that Scholar Diploma designation, we want to make sure that we're having those conversations early on whether they'll meet eligibility for deferring so that they can continue on to receive that specialized instruction to meet that diploma designation. You want to involve your school guidance counselor. And again, any coursework taken after the student graduates does not affect the student's GPA. So when we're looking at the first 4 deferral options, you know, they all must align with the student's transition assessment data, course of study, and measurable post-secondary goals. Everything should be documented in IEP team discussions. We really must identify what does that specially designed instruction, related services, and transition services look like in the IEP that prescribes the need that the student needs this in order to meet their post-secondary goals, and then the logistics of what that deferment is going to look like. The fifth and final area of eligibility for deferment is probably the most widely used. It is a structured work study, internship, or pre-apprenticeship program. And the reason it's probably the most widely used is it is very diverse to meet a wide range of students' needs. Once again, just like the other 4 areas, the availability will vary by the school district, and some of the programs have an application process, eligibility requirements, and possibly an enrollment cap. The first one that we're going to talk about briefly is internships. So we know that internships can be paid or unpaid, and they are exploratory or preparatory work experiences. Some internships are collaborations with community partners, such as CareerSource or other municipalities. And then, again, things are going to vary by district. We're going to review one type of internship for students with more cognitive disabilities, and that is called Project Search. Project Search is designed for students who have those cognitive or developmental disabilities who are eligible for supported employment services through vocational rehabilitation. In some cases, program sites might support other students with disabilities depending on enrollment and recruitment levels. But the bottom line is that they must meet eligibility for supported employment. It's a total immersion in a business-led setting with hands-on training. You can see on your screen 9 different types of host businesses that will house the interns each year. They range from medical facilities, hospitality centers, distribution facilities. I think Amazon has one, TD Bank has one, retail stores. If you're a large retail store and you can host interns, that's a possibility as well. These interns work in 3 rotations and have support from a team that includes not only their family, but employment job coaches or skills trainers, teachers, and local and state agencies. The outcome of this 1-year program is for the student who participated to have competitive integrated employment within a certain time frame after completion. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few more slides. Pre-apprenticeship programs, again, another way to provide work readiness and foundational skills, especially for those students who are going to go on to an apprenticeship program. To participate in a pre-apprenticeship program, you must be at least 16 years old. And then again, it's going to vary amongst school districts, as many are having to have articulation agreements with different types of community colleges and sponsors that have to deal with technical instruction. But a student can start this as early as their junior year. Structured work studies, as I shared, are probably one of the most varied because it's providing work readiness training, functional academics, possibly employment, independent living instruction, and it's really community based. It's students participating in hands-on learning. These are some of the different types of hands-on learning structured work studies that are available to students. So when looking at those structured work studies, it is instruction to address the students' transition service needs and special education services with supports from related providers as needed. And then it could also entail staff support, such as job coaches, employment specialists, and those sort of things. Some of these programs may offer certifications. Some partnerships may be needed between the school district and community agencies when looking at structured work studies. These are just a few examples of each skill elements of structured work study. The first, and one of the probably the most important for all of our students with disabilities, is instruction on that self-determination and self-advocacy, as well as social interaction, and that's having those appropriate conversations with coworkers, supervisors, customers, depending on the environment. That pro-social behavior, and that's how to initiate appropriate interactions with others. Travel training, teaching the student how to use public transportation, paratransit, Uber, Lyft, all those types of transportation. Communication, does the student need any kind of adaptive technology to meet the needs of the environment? Any types of activities of daily living, we want to make sure that our students have personal hygiene, self-care, meal preparation, and that kind of goes along with the independent living. Those are all elements of structured work study. When we're looking at structured work studies, the setting and transportation can vary greatly. You doesn't have to be in a school setting. It could be multiple settings. Transportation is that related service that a student might need in order to access their specially designed instruction. And some deferment programs do require student getting to school for themselves and by themselves independently. Along with the setting and transportation, the schedule might also vary amongst the student. There is no set requirement that the student has to come full day Monday through Friday. So the student schedule may look a little different in deferment years than it does when they're in the K to 12 grades. They may come partial or full day, a couple of days a week, or they may be in various sites across the district. Some of their services may include services that are provided by a community agency. So again, the scheduling is an IEP team decision and driven by student needs. So now that we've talked about deferment and we know what deferment is all about, how does it look in the transition individual education plan? We know that a goal without a plan is just a wish. So with that said, we want to begin with the end in mind. So how do we get there? First of all, we conduct age-appropriate transition assessments. That's where we're going to identify the student's strengths, interest, preference, and needs. We're also going to use those assessments along with student input to establish post-secondary goals of what the student wants to accomplish after they leave high school. Do they want to go on to college? Do they want to go on to on-the-job training? Where do they want to live? What is their career? And then once we identify those, then we're able to identify those transition services, annual goals, and agency linkages so that we can support that they will meet their measurable post-secondary goals. So what does that look like for deferment? It's vital to deferment because the individual education plan and the transition education plan have many, many components to support the student planning, needs, progress, and monitoring. These are just a few here as they relate to deferment. Annual goals are always part of an IEP, no matter what age. They reflect the areas of students' focus and need and can contribute to that team's discussion on deferment programming, eligibility, and design. Course of study. This is where we're going to include specific program details, expected dates of completion, and any relevant earnings of credentials, certificates, courses to be completed or earned by the student. Self-determination and self-advocacy are essential skills for all students in order to access their services, achieve goals, and to live a more independent and happy, high-quality life. And then agency linkages can be critical for many students to access services, employment, and their community. So we're going to continue on talking about essential components of that transition IEP in the next 4 slides. So again, that transition assessment, that is what the measurable post-secondary goals are based upon. This transition assessment data helps determine future educational needs and preparation for the student's post-secondary environments. So again, the transition assessments are key. So as we develop those measurable post-secondary goals from those transition assessments, then those measurable post-secondary goals become critical to determine if a student will be eligible to defer. These measurable post-secondary goals are written for what the student wants to do after high school. So we need these, if the student is not able to meet them and needs specialized instruction in order to meet them, it is imperative that they are written correctly and efficiently. So when we say that the deferment eligibility is based on a prescribed need for special education, transition planning and services, and/or related services, what does that mean? So, of course, special education, prescribed special education would be those services provided by that ESE teacher that are required to help the student make their progress towards their post-secondary goals. It could be that they're in a learning strategies class, that they're getting instruction delivered in community settings, or they need intensive instruction in self-determination and self-advocacy. When we're looking at transition planning and services, what are those activities that are going to help support the student for post-secondary life based on their strengths, needs, preferences, and interest? Do they need travel training? Do they need job coaching? Do they need links to outside agencies? Do they need instruction in budgeting and financial planning? As far as related services, supportive services that allow for students with disabilities to benefit from special education services. And that might be specialized transportation, language therapy, mental health counseling, occupational and/or physical therapy. And we began giving information on any type of district's high school level transition services, CTE programming, programs available to students with disabilities, and these 5 state agencies. This is given out starting at age 11, turning 12, or in 7th grade, whichever happens first. So what happens in the deferment years? So the team is collecting data. Well, this is for eligibility. All students with disabilities must go through this process with the IEP team of determining deferment eligibility. And these are the some sample questions that should be a part of that determination. We're looking at, again, at the student's measurable post-secondary goals and where they are now and what do they need in order to meet those post-secondary goals. Could the student make progress towards and achieve their measurable post-secondary goals and take their standard diploma with just accommodations and services under the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and/or the Americans with Disability Act? Is that a possibility? What agency linkages have been provided to the student, and do they meet eligibility requirements needed for desired deferment program? The initial deferment decision we talked a little bit about beforehand. The 2 important things is that this parent understands the deferral decision, and then part 2 is identification of whether the student intends to defer or not defer if they meet eligibility. The deferral decision may be revisited anytime up to May 15th of the school year the student is expected to meet graduation. The next 2 slides are just kind of an overview of that most of our students do not defer. Most of them either do not meet eligibility to defer or have a plan that does not allow the student to come back after meeting graduation requirements. So some of our students will meet eligibility for deferment and remain with that final deferment decision from their junior year to their senior year. And of course, some students will, post-secondary goals might change, or they might have opportunities elsewhere, so they might change their decision from no to yes and yes to no. But that's only a few students that actually happens. Just some considerations when we're looking at deferral logistics. The year in which the student meets standard diploma requirements is the one that will always be associated with their date printed on their standard diploma. Participation in any senior or graduation activities is district determined. And while a student is in deferment, the team continues to collect data, document annual goal progress, and make adjustments as needed. The student will continue to have an annual IEP, and the team will continue to use progress monitoring data to make decisions regarding that deferment. For a student, once they have deferred, it's not typically a discussion of eligibility each year. A student would be ending deferment and therefore ending FAPE at one of two ventures. Once, when the student turns 22, as that is defined in each Florida district's policies and procedures, or the student opts to take receipt of their diploma. So there might be some situations where a student does earn their industry certification and therefore no longer need that specialized instruction, so they may end their deferment earlier than aging out. And there could be some programs that, such as Project Search, are considered to be an expectation for when the student completes that program, they take receipt of their standard diploma. So these are all things that need to be discussed during that deferment discussion. Final deferment thoughts. Again, the discussion of deferment eligibility and enrollment begins well in advance of the student's final senior year. And we want to think of deferment as an opportunity that provides additional time for specific and intentional programs, services, and experiences to be afforded to students who need specialized instruction, transition services, and related services to support meeting their measurable post-secondary goals. We have a ton of resources on our website. Legislation is also there. I'm going to skip. This is my contact information. Should you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. There is an evaluation link. We always appreciate your feedback. Normally this is about a 2.5 hour presentation. So it did go a little bit faster than normal, but feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns. And then the Parent Academy also has an evaluation for you to fill out.